Picture the scene. You're a high-up sales representative looking for an economical, handsome, reliable and powerful saloon to ferry you up and down the country that doesn't break the bank on business tax. You may be considering this lovely Mazda 6 here. However, the earlier versions of these cars are notorious for a truly terrible diesel engine, the 2.2 Skyactiv D. So why on earth are these engines so terrible? Well, I'm uniquely qualified to talk about them as I'm a Mazda specialist, and I specialise in these diesel engines specifically. These engines are notorious for three specific things: oil pressure problems, DPF problems, and EGR problems. Add into that, oh yeah, a fourth one as well, injectors. You have failures in every major subsystem of the vehicle. The injector seals on these cars are terrible for failure. This is an updated one. They are much better, but they are still known for failure. We also have intake manifold here from one of the older 2.2s. This EGR pipe here is responsible for so much engine carnage, it is unreal. These engines have to run so much EGR to meet emissions, so EGR stands for exhaust gas recirculation, that they carbon up the entire manifold and literally completely fill it with soot. Why does that happen, you ask? The reason for that is something called positive crankcase ventilation. Now what this is, if you give me a second, in the top of the rocker cover here, you can see we have an outlet. What that is for is that when the engine gets hot, all of the oil vapours in the top of the engine have to be burned off for emissions. So you have an inlet here that collects all these oil vapours, and then the vacuum from the intake of the engine sucks them back through the engine and they're burnt off. However, slight problem, they mix with the EGR soot, and as we know, as soon as you mix any kind of substance with soot, it basically becomes an abrasive paste. That then bakes itself onto the inside of the manifold, the inside of the EGR system and the inside of the intake runners, and you end up with carbon buildup. That reduces your engine performance, reduces your engine lifespan, and can ultimately lead to engine problems. They also have issues with the oiling system. The oil pump chains snap, the oil pumps go. Why do the oil pumps go? Because the injector seals fail. It carbonises the oil in the top end of the engine, which then gets washed down into the sump by the oil showers for the camshafts, and then it blocks up the oil pickup on the pump. That starves the engine of oil pressure. Best case, you're £900 deep in a strainer. Worst case, you're £3.5 deep for a new engine. They also have turbocharger problems. There is a valve on the turbos that can get sucked into the small turbo, because these are a twin turbo motor, and it completely destroys the small turbo. At that point, you're £1,500 deep in turbos. These are not an engine for the faint-hearted. So Owen, you're thinking as a viewer, show us a good one. Well, hold your horses, because we have it right here. This is Mazda's all new, all singing, all dancing 2.2 Skyactiv D Adblue. So the basic recipe is exactly the same. We have a 2.2 litre, 4-cylinder, twin-turbo diesel engine, 4 injectors, 4 cylinders, and a DPF. However, so many things on this engine have been revised. The entire block has been redesigned, the turbos are redesigned, the injectors are redesigned, half of the EGR system has been redesigned. There's a brand new ECU, brand new gearbox, pretty much everything on this engine has been changed. And what does that get us? Up to 210 horsepower from factory and up to 500 Newton meters of torque. This particular example here is the one to have. It's the 184 horsepower 2.2 litre diesel, and it has 450 Newton meters of torque. Tell me another diesel engine that produces that amount of torque from that amount of displacement. So think about it this way, the family of engines is pretty much the same, the recipe as you will. It's still a 2.2 litre, 4-cylinder, twin-turbo diesel. However, it's been fettled by the engineers at Mazda to be completely redesigned. Let's take a look under the bonnet and see what we have underneath. So, now that we've got our engine apart, we can clearly see some of the differences. The first, and arguably the largest in my opinion, is our fuel injectors. This has been completely redesigned and co-developed between Denso and Bosch. We have a completely different connector. So the original one has a 2-pin connector, this has 6. The injectors are designed to have a much more adaptable spray pattern. There are also sensors inside the injector that measure fuel temperature, rail pressure, fuel pressure inside the injector nozzle just before it fires, and also the piezoelectric stack, which is basically a solenoid inside the actual injector itself, or a switch. Can change shape in a lot of different ways, and that basically means that you have a much wider variation of spray patterns. Why is that important, you ask? Well, that improves your fuel efficiency, that improves your power delivery, and it also improves injector life as well. The second thing we need to talk about, and 2.2 diesel owners out there, you're going to know all about this, the injector seals. Mazda fit the updated injector seals to these engines from factory. That means that realistically, they don't need changing until 100,000 miles. For these, I still recommend a replacement interval of around 50 to 60,000, just for preventative maintenance and just to take into account everyone's driving conditions. It also means that because we know that as engines get older, they start to leak, all of your gaskets are preemptively done. You're never going to have any issues with oil leaks. This engine also has a completely reworked exhaust camshaft. Now, the older 2.2s are notorious for exhaust camshaft wear because they have variable valve lift on the exhaust side. That's for emissions. Mazda have completely ditched this, and they've gone for a standard design of camshaft on both inlet and exhaust. No variable system whatsoever. Standard rocker arms, standard valves. We've also got the updated design of valves as well that don't carbon up on the stem, so you don't have the issues with the valve sticking, you don't have issues with worn cams as long as you change your oil on time. We also have an updated exhaust pressure pipe. Again, 2.2 owners, you're going to know all about this. This exhaust pressure pipe here is notorious for blocking on the older models. Why? Because the design is as such that you've got a 90-degree bend, and what basically happens is at that 90 degree, it blocks full of diesel soot, the sensor doesn't read properly, and instead of throwing an exhaust pressure code, the ECU throws a turbo code. So the engine control unit, this computer right here that runs the engine, throws a turbo code. Lots of garages will go, well, right, it needs turbos then, when actually 99% of the time it's this pressure pipe that's blocked. This newer one has a much improved design. If you look at the design of the bend, they're all less than 90 degrees. I have never seen one of these block up, and I've worked on these on examples that have done over 300,000 miles. We've also got a revised EGR system and turbo pack. Now, this new turbo pack is electronically controlled, so the wastegates, which basically let exhaust gas into the exhaust side of the turbochargers to spin them up, are now controlled by the computer rather than a vacuum system. That means the turbochargers spool up more quickly, you get way more torque as soon as you put your foot down, and you also get more power at the top end. Just as a comparison for you, the 150 horsepower model of this engine, so this AdBlue one with the updated turbos, 420 newton meters of torque from factory, from 500 revs to the red line. The older 150 horse model from the pre-AdBlue with the older design of turbos, that vacuum controlled wastegate, 380 newton meters of torque, and it doesn't come in until 1500 RPM. So this thing can pull from idle with all of the torque in one go, all the way to the red line. The EGR system has an updated EGR cooler and also updated EGR valves. We've also got updated programming on the computer as well. That means that the EGR system itself, which recirculates exhaust gases back through the engines for emissions and also to keep those cylinder temps down, basically runs in a more efficient manner. It's much more tangibly controllable, and basically what I mean by that is you've got much finer control through the computer, and that is also helped by the fact that over there we have got a much improved engine control unit, or ECU, to run the show. That is a far higher definition unit, and what I mean by that is that it's got much tighter controls, i.e. the values that it controls down to are much smaller. compared to the older design. Now what that essentially means is that the engine's just going to run better. You know, the fueling's going to be better, the intake temps are going to be better, the turbo spool is going to be better, as we've discussed just on power figures alone. The fuel economy on this engine is about 10% better than the older unit as well. You don't have any of the issues that the older unit has, bar stuff that is fairly typical for Euro 6 diesels. And what I mean by that is you do have the occasional injector go on these, you still have the carbon buildup as we can see on the inlet, although nowhere near as bad as the older design, because we are literally running half the amount of exhaust gas back through the inlet. We don't have shutter valve issues, and that is because the EGR system's revised on the intake itself, so the pipe is in a completely different orientation. And we also have better emissions out the back end. Thanks for watching my video on the 2.2 Adblue diesel, one of the best diesels ever made in my opinion as a Euro 6 model. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you again soon.